Today we're diving into a dramatic development that's sending shockwaves through Europe and the Kremlin alike. Denmark is essentially cutting off a key Russian route through the Baltic Sea, and that has Putin scrambling. What's going on? Why does it matter? And what could come next? Let's break it down. Over the past few days, Danish authorities have announced that they are tightening control over oil tankers passing through their waters, with a particular focus on what they call Russia's shadow fleet. Vessels with opaque ownership structures, often old, poorly maintained, and used to skirt sanctions. The idea is to force more transparency, enforce stricter environmental and safety inspections, and make it much harder for Russia to move resources covertly through Baltic routes. To understand why this move is being framed as a panic for Putin, you need to see how crucial the Baltic routes are. Even after many sanctions and restrictions, Russia continues to rely on maritime passages to export energy, move supplies, and maintain some regional influence. Disrupting or regulating those routes adds pressure to Moscow's ability to maneuver in the European arena. Now, Denmark's pivot isn't just about inspections or environmental standards. Denmark is already confronting repeated Russian provocations in its straits. According to Danish defense intelligence, Russian warships have sailed on collision courses with Danish naval vessels, pointed weapons at Danish helicopters and ships, or at least directed tracking radars, and interfered with navigation systems. These aren't random accidents. Denmark sees them as hybrid warfare tactics, methods by which Russia pressures NATO and European states while stopping short of outright conventional war. From the Russian viewpoint, this tightening of Danish oversight is a direct threat to one of the lifelines for its maritime operations. Putin must now worry about whether more vessels will be detained, sanctioned, or flagged, and that means costs, delays, and diplomatic backlash. So far, Denmark's measures are targeted mostly at older tankers, vessels with questionable safety and environmental records, and those that might violate the EU sanctions on Russian oil exports. Denmark claims it is not outright banning all traffic, but setting stricter rules so that Russia's shadow fleet can't continue business as usual. But even this soft approach has serious implications. Ships that fail inspections can be delayed, fined, or denied passage, and the reputational risks for insurers and flag states increase. Some analysts see this as a signal. Denmark is moving from passive to active in enforcing the Western sanctions regime. Now, Russia officially denies any hostile intent, but the pattern is clear. Denmark, backed implicitly by NATO and EU pressure, is gradually choking a corridor Russia long considered vital. Let's discuss why this is such a high-stakes move. First, it adds friction to Russia's ability to use maritime routes for oil and resources. Even small delays or inspection costs escalate when multiplied over many shipments. Second, it weakens Russia's strategic flexibility in the Baltic region. It can't as freely maneuver ships or hide shadow fleet operations in that corridor anymore without risking scrutiny. Third, it sends a message to other Baltic and Scandinavian countries that maritime control and enforcement are tools of strategic deterrence. Fourth, it heightens the geopolitical pressure on Moscow at a time when its options are already under strain from sanctions, military costs, and logistical constraints. From the Russian side, one possible response is escalation in hybrid tactics, more cyber interference, GPS jamming, drone incursions, or sabotage of undersea infrastructure. In fact, the Baltic region has already seen undersea cable disruptions and sabotage allegations not always conclusively tied to Russia, but certainly in that sphere. Another approach could be to leverage diplomatic or economic retaliation, pressuring countries that rely on Russian energy or supply chains to push back on Denmark's measures. One question is, how far will Denmark go? Will it escalate to denying any Russian, flagged or Russian origin vessels entirely, or will it keep the line at strict inspections and regulatory pressure? So far, Denmark is signaling it doesn't want to provoke open conflict, but wants to use legal and environmental rules to squeeze Moscow's options. The surprising thing is that even moderate steps appear to rattle the Kremlin, because they chip away at Moscow's ability to operate in gray zones, those spaces just below full warfare. For those watching from other states, this could set a template. Coastal nations enforcing stronger oversight to cut off or straitjacket adversarial maritime operations. If Denmark's strategy works, it may inspire Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Sweden, and even Poland to tighten their own maritime regimes. On the flip side, Russia might challenge those regimes harder, risking incidents, diplomatic standoffs, or worse. Let's talk about possible ripple effects. One is that vessels flagged under countries complicit in Russia's shadow fleet practices may get blacklisted or denied port access elsewhere. Insurance providers, wary of reputational or legal risks, may refuse coverage. Russia's shipping network becomes less flexible. Over time, bypass routes will become more expensive, subject to greater scrutiny, or unviable. Another ripple, increased naval presence in the Baltic and North Seas by NATO powers. If Denmark is stepping up enforcement, it likely expects support, backup, or deterrent presence from its allies. We may see more NATO patrols, more surveillance, more countermeasures against drone or submarine threats. That increases the risk of confrontation, whether intentional or accidental. Another possible impact, Russia might use energy as leverage. If its ability to move oil or fuel through the Baltic is threatened, Moscow might threaten cuts elsewhere or ramp up pressure in other theaters. They may also try to cultivate allies to protest or block Denmark's moves diplomatically. I should note those advocating for caution warn that Denmark must balance enforcement with international maritime law. Denmark, as a coastal state, can't indiscriminately block international shipping unless it has a solid legal basis. That's why much of the rhetoric focuses on environmental safety rules, ship maintenance standards, or flag state regulations, legal covers for enforcement. Also, critics say these new rules may not have immediate dramatic effect. Some vessels may just comply or reroute slightly unless Denmark escalates further. But symbolic weight matters. Even moderate steps change perceptions, risk calculations, and strain operating margins. From Putin's perspective, this is a headache. He must weigh how much to retaliate. Overt retaliation risks conflict escalation. Covert retaliation risks reputation and further sanctioning. Meanwhile, tightening control of the Baltic under more hostile conditions forces Russia to guard shipping lanes more heavily, consume more resources, and accept increased exposure. In sum, Denmark's move is more than bureaucratic tightening. It's a strategic maneuver, a way to close one of the remaining loopholes Russia has in Europe's maritime domain. The panic in the title is apt, because these are the kinds of pressure points that force Moscow to rethink its assumptions. So where do we go from here? Watch the next few indicators, whether any Russian tankers are detained or refused passage in Danish waters, whether Russia protests diplomatically or orders retaliatory maritime or hybrid operations, whether Denmark escalates to broader bans or pressures allies to join in, whether other Baltic North Sea nations mirror or support these steps, and whether we start seeing more naval confrontations, drone incursions, or cyber attacks tied to maritime control. The stakes are high. This is maritime strategy in action, a chess match over sea lanes, influence, and deterrence. If Denmark can successfully squeeze Moscow's routes without triggering full-scale conflict, it will be a model for how smaller states can use regulatory and legal tools to challenge bigger adversaries. Thanks for watching this deep dive. If you found this useful, hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned. I'll keep tracking how Russia and Europe respond next.